The night Soren Vale came home smelling of her, he looked his mate in the eyes and lied. Not the stumbling, nervous lie of a man who knows he's been caught. The clean, practiced lie of a man who had been telling it so long it had started to feel like truth. Deva Vale stood in the doorway of their bedroom with their 3-month-old daughter pressed against her shoulder, and she looked at her husband, the alpha of the Thornmere pack, the man the bond had chosen for her, the man she had built a life alongside for 2 years, and she smelled everything. Wolf's senses were not designed for comfortable ignorance. The scent was not faint. It was not the trace of someone brushed past in a hallway. It was the deep, settled scent of proximity, of hours, of something that had no innocent explanation. Soren met her eyes, and she watched him make the decision, watched it happen in the set of his jaw and the quality of his stillness, to look her in the face and say he had been at the eastern border all day. Eastern border. She said nothing. She turned away and walked to the nursery with their daughter, and she laid the baby down in the crib with the practiced gentleness of a woman whose hands knew how to be soft even when everything inside her was not, and she stood at the crib rail and looked down at her daughter's sleeping face. Ressa, 8 pounds, 4 ounces, 3 months old, hazel eyes that shifted toward amber in certain light. A specific expression when she was about to cry that looked so much like Soren's expression when something displeased him that it had, once, made Deva laugh and cry at the same time. She looked at her daughter. She thought about every small wrong thing that had accumulated over the past 4 months. Every late return, every distracted silence, every moment of the present absence that a wolf who loved you could not fake and a wolf who was elsewhere emotionally could not conceal. She had told herself she was imagining it. Mothers of newborns were tired and untethered and susceptible to reading crisis into everything. She had told herself this so thoroughly that she had almost stopped trusting her own senses. Her senses had been right all along. She stood at the crib rail in the dark, and she made a decision so quietly that she barely felt it happening. The way the most important decisions are often made, not in a confrontation, not in a breaking point, in a nursery, in the dark, watching your daughter sleep. If you are new here, subscribe right now, like the video, and drop in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Because what happens next in this story is going to pull the floor out from under you. Stay close. Deva Heron had not been looking for a bond when she found one. She had been 24, mid-ranking in the Greyvale pack, working as the pack's primary water territory assessor, a specific and unglamorous role that involved testing the pack's freshwater sources for contamination, seasonal flow changes, and the quiet maintenance work that kept the pack's most essential resource reliable. She was good at the work. She liked the work. She liked that it required her to move through the territory alone, paying attention to things that did not talk back. She had come to Thornmere for a regional water assessment, a formal environmental survey that the Verek Court's Territory Council commissioned every 3 years for all Western packs. Thornmere had been on the survey schedule. Deva had been assigned. She had expected to spend 4 days doing measurements and leave. The bond had found her on the 3rd day. She had been taking readings at the Northern Creek, knee-deep in cold water with her measurement equipment, thoroughly absorbed in the specific, quiet pleasure of numbers behaving correctly, when she had become aware of someone standing on the bank. The awareness had been physical before it was visual. A warmth, a pull, the complete, disorienting arrival of something that immediately reorganized her understanding of what she had been missing. She had looked up. Soren Vale had been looking at her from the bank with an expression that told her, clearly, that whatever had just happened had happened to him too. He was, by the pack standards, exactly what an alpha was supposed to be. Tall, sharp-featured, the kind of presence that commanded rooms without effort. He had been alpha for 4 years, inheriting the role from his father at 26, and he carried it with the specific, settled authority of someone who had grown into rather than merely taken the position. He had also been, she would learn later, in the prolonged aftermath of a relationship that had ended 8 months before she arrived in Thornmere. Her name was Celine Harst. She had been with Soren for 3 years before the bond arrived and displaced her with someone who had been knee-deep in a creek measuring water levels. David did not know this on the bank of the northern creek. She would not know it for months. The bond had been immediate and total in the way that bonds were immediate and total, not romantic in the careful, chosen sense, but recognized. Like finding a room that had always existed inside you and discovering, unexpectedly, that someone else had a key. They had been formally bonded within the year. Ressa had arrived 14 months after the bonding. And somewhere in those 14 months, somewhere in the accumulation of a new mate and a pregnancy and the responsibilities of leading a pack and the specific, grinding relentlessness of life, not stopping to be tended to, Soren had gone back. Not physically, perhaps, not at first, but emotionally, back to the woman the bond had interrupted, back to a love that had been unfinished and that had, apparently, decided it was not willing to stay unfinished. David did not confront him that night. She did not confront him the next night either. She was not, by nature, a person who moved fast. Water assessment work had taught her that patience was not passivity, that sometimes the correct response to a thing was to observe it fully before deciding what to do about it, to take all the measurements, to understand the complete shape of the problem before committing to a solution. She observed. She gave herself 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, she watched with the clear, methodical attention that had made her exceptional at her work. She watched the pattern of his absences. She noted the specific way his phone screen tilted when she was in the room. She noticed the moments when his eyes went somewhere else while she was talking, not distracted, but absent, the way people are absent when their attention is genuinely elsewhere. She also watched him with Ressa. He was not a bad father. She needed to be clear about that in her own reckoning, because the clarity mattered. With Ressa, he was present, more present than with anyone else. He held their daughter with the particular tenderness of a man who surprised himself with how large the love was. He woke for night feeds without being asked. He sat on the nursery floor in the evenings and made sounds at his daughter until she laughed. And his face in those moments was entirely without the distance that had colonized everything else. This was the part she could not make simple. He was failing her. He was not failing Ressa. And those two things could not be reconciled into a clean story, which was why David took 2 weeks instead of 2 days. She also, quietly and without fanfare, began to make preparations. On the 14th day, she called her mother. Her mother, a woman named Bress who had survived her own mate bond complications with the specific, unsentimental resilience of someone who had learned that life did not owe you the story you planned, listened to everything Dava said without interrupting once. When Dava finished, there was a silence. Then Bress said, "Where do you want to go? Not what should you do? Not have you talked to him. Where do you want to go?" Because Bress knew her daughter. She knew that Dava was not calling to be talked out of anything. She was calling because she had made a decision and she needed someone who loved her to know it before she acted on it. "Kareth," Dava said. "Aunt Morta's place." Morta Heron was Dava's mother's sister, 62 years old, never mated, living on a property in the Kareth territory that was 3 hours north of Thornmere, and that had, more importantly, clean water access for the baby and a healer's practice in the nearby town and enough distance that Soren would have to want to follow rather than stumbling across them accidentally. I'll call Morta, Bress said. Not yet, Davis said. Give me a week. I wanna try one more thing first. One more thing. She owed him that. She owed herself that. The conversation with Soren happened on a Sunday evening. Ressa was asleep. The house was quiet. Deva found him in the kitchen and she sat down at the table, and she looked at him across the ordinary distance of a kitchen table that had held 400 evening meals, and she said, with the complete evenness of a woman who had given herself 2 weeks and was not going to perform any part of this. I know about Celine. The kitchen went very still. Soren turned. Slowly. The expression on his face was complex in the way that the face of a man who has been keeping a secret is complex when the keeping is over. Not guilty caught. Something more than that. The specific pain of someone who knows they have done a wrong thing and has not figured out how to face it. Deva, don't apologize yet, she said. Quietly. I want to know the truth first. The apology can come after. He looked at her. Then he sat down. And he told her. He told her what she had suspected and confirmed and carried for 2 weeks. That Celine had returned to Thornmere 5 months ago. That they had started talking first and then meeting. That he had told himself each time it was the last time. That he had found himself in something he had not planned to be in and had not known how to get out of, because walking away from Celine had always been the thing he could not do. He told her this with the honesty of a man at the end of something, not the beginning. Like a confession that had been building pressure for months and had finally found the release point. Deva listened to all of it. When he finished, the kitchen was very quiet. I love you, he said. And she believed it. That was the terrible thing, she believed it. He was not lying about this. The bond was real on his side too. He did love her. He also loved someone else. And he had not been honest about that, with himself or with her, from the moment Celine came back. I know, she said. I don't know how to, he stopped. You don't know how to choose, she said. He looked at the table. That was the answer. Not in the words, in the looking away. She had asked him a question with her silence, and his eyes had answered it. He did not know how to choose. Which meant he had not chosen. Which meant he had been living in both places at once for 5 months, keeping each one separate, giving each one pieces of himself, while she fed a newborn and waited for the man she had bonded with to come home to her fully. She stood up. I'm going to give you some time to figure it out, she said. He looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means I'm taking Ressa to visit my family. I'm going to give you the space to make the decision you clearly haven't been able to make. Her voice was still even, still careful. This was the last careful moment before the thing became what it was going to become. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing it because I cannot stay in a home where I have to wonder which version of my husband came back at the end of the day. Ressa deserves a father who knows where he is. And I deserve a mate who is actually here. He was staring at her. You can't just. I'm not leaving forever, she said. I'm giving you space. Use it. She paused at the kitchen door. When you know what you want, all the way, not halfway, you know where to find me. She went a pack. She did not cry until she was on the road north. Ressa sleeping in the infant seat behind her, the Thornmere Pack's territory disappearing in the rear view. Then she cried. Not the dramatic, gasping kind. The quiet kind. The kind that happens when something you had hoped was not true turns out to be exactly as true as you feared, and the hope leaving your body takes some of the air with it. She cried for 40 minutes on the empty northern road. Then she stopped. She took a breath. She looked in the rear view at her daughter's sleeping face. She kept driving. Morta Heron's property was exactly what it had always been. A place where things were simple and clear, and the air smelled like pine and cold water, and the kind of quiet that was restorative rather than empty. Morta herself was a woman who had arrived at 62 with the complete confidence of someone who had stopped trying to be anything other than what she was. She had never made it. She had lived her life by her own construction. She had opinions about everything and expressed them without apology, and was one of the most genuinely warm people Deva had ever known. She met Deva at the door, took Ressa from her arms before Deva had even finished getting out of the car, and said, "You look terrible. Come inside." The first week was recovery. Sleep that was not interrupted by waiting for the sound of a car in the driveway at 2 in the morning. Meals that Morta cooked with the specific, no-nonsense nourishment of a woman who believed that food was care made practical. Long mornings with Ressa on the property's back porch, watching the tree line and not thinking about anything further than the tree line. Deva's wolf settled. She had not realized how unsettled her wolf had been until the unsettledness had somewhere quiet to decompress. For months of a mate whose presence was half present, a pregnancy and a newborn, the low, persistent wrongness of something she could not name until she named it. All of that had been held inside her body as a constant tension, and in the pine-scented quiet of the Kareth territory, that tension began, slowly, to release. She was not okay. But she was starting to know who she was outside of the relationship that had consumed her for 2 years. That was its own kind of progress. Soren called on the 4th day. She let it go to voicemail. He called again on the 6th day. Again on the 8th. She listened to the voicemails. Each one was, she had to give him this, not performative. Not the careful, calculated messages of a man managing a situation. They were the messages of a man who was in genuine distress, who was waking up in a house that felt different without her, who was looking at the empty crib in the nursery and understanding, perhaps for the first time, the full weight of what was at stake. She did not call back. Not because she wanted to punish him. She had told him the truth. She had not left to punish him. She had left to give him room. Room meant room. It meant not filling every silence with reassurance. Not coming back before he had done the work she had asked him to do. She had spent 2 years filling silences with reassurance. She was done with that. The unexpected thing happened on the 9th day. She was at the Kareth Pack's small community market, a weekly gathering that Morta attended religiously and had been bringing Deva to since her arrival, on the grounds that sunlight and other people and fresh vegetables were all medicinal, when she felt something strange. Not the mate bond. The mate bond was still there, as bonds always were, a distant warm pull toward the north where Soren was. She had grown used to holding it at arm's length the way you hold something you're not ready to engage with. This was different. She was standing at the honey vendor's table, Ressa strapped to her chest in the carrier, and she felt the awareness of being watched. She turned. A man she did not recognize was standing 2 stalls away. He was not looking at her in the alarming way. He was looking in the way of someone who had been trying to decide whether to say something and had not yet decided. Mid-30s, weathered in the outdoors way rather than the worn-down way, with light brown hair and the specific build of someone who spent significant time in wolf form. Strong without performance. When she turned, he did not look away. That directness, the choosing not to look away, was a wolf thing, not rudeness. He crossed to her stall. "Deva Heron," he said. A statement, not a question, which meant he knew who she was. "Vale," she said. "Deva Vale." He absorbed the correction. "I apologize. I only know the name from the territory records." A brief pause. "My name is Corin Setch. I'm the Kareth Pack's Eastern Assessor. Water assessment." She looked at him more specifically. "Environmental or territorial?" she said. "Environmental. Primary focus on the creek systems in the Eastern Ridge." Water territory," she said. "Freshwater sources, contamination, seasonal flow." Something shifted in his expression. The particular shift that happened between specialists who had just identified a shared language. The Eastern Ridge creeks have been showing anomalous pH readings for 2 seasons, he said. I've been trying to trace the source. Upstream mineral deposits or introduced contaminant, she said. I think introduced. The pattern doesn't match natural variation. She looked at him. Do you have the data? He did have the data. They ended up spending 2 hours at Morta's kitchen table going through his readings while Ressa slept in the carrier between them, and Morta made tea and listened with the quiet satisfaction of someone watching something good happen without interfering. The contamination, Deva concluded from the data, was upstream. A specific combination of indicators suggested an old industrial site, pre-pack settlement, possibly a mining operation, whose runoff was finally reaching the creek system after years of slow subsurface migration. Corin had been measuring the wrong points. Not incorrectly. He had been measuring what he had always measured. But the anomaly required a different set of sample points to trace properly. She showed him on his own map. He looked at it. I've been looking at this for 2 seasons, he said. 2 full seasons of readings. The sample network made sense for ordinary monitoring, she said. The source is just upstream of what you were measuring. He looked at her. Would you be willing to come out to the site? A pause. Professionally. Your expertise would resolve this in a day. He stopped. Smiled slightly, with the self-deprecating honesty of someone who was secure enough to admit being wrong. I've been very stuck. She looked at Ressa. I have a 3-month-old, she said. Morta can watch her. Morta said from the kitchen counter, in a tone suggesting she had already decided this. Deva looked at her aunt. You were listening the whole time, she said. I made the tea, Morta said. What do you think that means? The Eastern Ridge was, it turned out, the most beautiful stretch of terrain she had seen since arriving in Kareth. The creek systems ran through dense old-growth forest that opened periodically into small clearings where the water slowed and caught the afternoon light. Her wolf, who had been patient and quiet in the house, but was reliably alive in moving water and open ground, shook herself awake the moment they left the vehicle. Corin Setch, in the field, was a different kind of person than at the kitchen table. Not different in character. She had learned enough about people to know that the person someone was at the kitchen table was the real person, and the field version was just the same person with more room. But he was more fully himself outdoors. Less contained. He moved through the creek terrain with the ease of genuine familiarity. This was his ground, known in the specific, bodily way that you know land you have spent years in. He talked about the creek systems the way she talked about water tables, with the particular affection of a specialist who had been paying attention to something for long enough that it had become almost a relationship. She found the contamination source in 4 hours. Upstream industrial runoff, exactly as her analysis had suggested. An old tailings pond from a pre-settlement mining operation, far enough back in the ridge that it had never been flagged in environmental surveys because the surveys had always started a half-mile too far downstream. Corin stood at the edge of the tailings pond in the late afternoon and looked at it with the expression of someone who has been carrying a mystery and has just been handed its solution. 2 seasons, he said quietly. The monitoring network was designed for natural variation detection, she said. It was doing its job correctly. The source was just outside the design parameters. He turned to look at her. You solved it in 4 hours, he said. You had collected 2 seasons of excellent data, she said. I just had the advantage of fresh eyes. You're very generous about other people's mistakes, he said. They weren't mistakes, she said. The sampling approach was reasonable. Sometimes the problem lives upstream of the reasonable. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the water. Is that a metaphor? he said. She looked at him sideways. Does it need to be? The slight smile again. No, he said. I suppose it's just true. They walked back through the forest as the light dropped. She felt her wolf, that reliable internal barometer, register something. Not the bond's pull. Not the alarming, identity-disrupting arrival of the fated recognition. Something quieter. The specific warmth of being in the presence of someone who was good and meant what they said and moved through the world without the constant calculation of advantage. She did not name it. It was too early to name it, and besides, she had other things she was in the middle of. But she noticed it. Soren came to Kareth on the 12th day. She saw his vehicle from the back porch. She had time to feel several things in the 3 minutes between seeing it and hearing the knock on Morta's front door. The bond surged toward him, the particular brace of someone preparing for something they do not know the shape of, and underneath both of those, the steady, rooted awareness that she had not moved from in the past 12 days. The knowledge of what she needed. The knowledge that she had not changed her requirements because the time had passed, or because the drive was long. Morta opened the door. There was a brief exchange of words that Deva could not hear, but could gauge entirely from Morta's body language. Direct, unintimidated, the posture of a woman who had no particular investment in making an alpha comfortable on her front step. Then Soren was in the house. He found Deva on the back porch. He looked different from the last time she had seen him. Not lighter. The opposite. Heavier. In the way of a man who had spent 12 days looking at something he had been avoiding and had not been able to look away. He sat down in the chair across from her without being invited, which was either confidence or desperation, and she decided it was probably both. Ressa was in the carrier on Deva's chest. Soren looked at his daughter. Something moved across his face that was not performable. The specific, enormous love of a parent looking at a very small person who does not yet know how large the stakes are. I ended it, he said. Low. Direct. Deva looked at him. With Celine. Yes. When? 4 days ago. A pause. It took me. I needed to be certain first. I didn't want to end it, and then, he stopped. And then go back, she said. Yes. Are you certain now? She said. He met her eyes. Yes, he said. The word was not easy or light. It landed like something that had been reached after a real internal struggle, which was the only kind of certainty she would have believed. She sat with it. Tell me why, she said. Not why you ended it. Why you're certain. He looked at Ressa again. Because I was sitting in that house on the 8th night, he said, and I realized what I was doing. I was trying to keep both. I was telling myself the bond was separate from the choice, that they could exist at the same time, that Celine was, that what we had was something the bond couldn't replace, and therefore something I was owed. His jaw tightened, and I looked at it clearly for the first time. What I was actually doing. I was taking from you. I was taking from her. He looked at Ressa. I was sitting in a house that smelled like the absence of my daughter, and I understood something I had been refusing to understand. What? She said. That I had been a coward, he said. About all of it. About ending things with Celine before the bond, or ending them properly after. About being honest with you when she came back. About, his voice went through something for a moment. About the fact that choosing is not the same as accepting. I kept thinking I was choosing you by staying. But staying is not choosing. Choosing requires ending something. It requires accepting that one path closes when you take another. And I kept walking down 2 paths because I didn't want to accept the closing. The porch was very quiet. The forest at the edge of Morta's property moved in the late afternoon wind. I believe you, Davis said. He looked at her quickly, something raw in his expression. But, she said. He stilled. I am not coming home tomorrow, she said. What you've told me is the beginning of something, not the end. You ended it with saline. That is one step. The next step is longer and harder and doesn't have a fixed arrival point. She looked at him. I am not punishing you. I need you to hear that. I am not making this difficult for the sake of making it difficult. I know, he said. I need to know that what I come back to is real, she said. Not made real by fear of losing us. Actually real. Made by choosing us every day, not once under pressure. She paused. That takes time to prove. Not to me, to yourself. Ressa stirred in the carrier. Made a small sound. Soren watched his daughter the way someone watches something they almost lost. Can I hold her? He said. Deva lifted Ressa from the carrier and placed her in his arms. He held his daughter in Morta's back porch in the late afternoon, and he did not try to say anything else for a while. He just held her. Like a man relearning what he had. Deva watched them both. Her wolf watched too, and something that had been locked and braced inside her shifted. Not open. Not yet. But slightly less locked. He came back every weekend. Not to push. Not to argue. Not to make his case with speeches. He came on Saturday mornings, and he spent the day with Ressa, and he left on Sunday evenings. And in between he was present, in the way she had been asking him to be present for months. Not perfectly. Not without the occasional moment where old habits showed at the edges. But genuinely trying in the way that genuine effort was visible precisely because it was not smooth. He helped Morta with the property maintenance one weekend without being asked, fixed a drainage problem on the side of the building that had been causing a slow leak for 2 seasons. He learned Koren Sech's name from the PAX community records and said nothing about it. He had enough wolf sense to know that something had been in the Kareth territory that was not threat to his mate, but was not nothing either. And he had enough self-awareness to understand that jealousy was not a currency he had earned the right to spend. He ate dinner with Deva and Morta on the 3rd weekend without performing anything. Just sat at the table and was a person, which was all she had ever asked. Week 5, she let him put Ressa to bed. She stood in the doorway and watched him sit on the edge of the small travel cot Morta had set up in the guest room, holding his daughter's hand through the crib slats, humming something that didn't have a proper melody, but that Ressa seemed to find completely adequate. He had not seen her in the doorway. She watched him for a long time. She told Koren she was going home at the end of the 6th week. They were at the Eastern Ridge again. She had been back twice more to help establish the monitoring adjustments for the contamination remediation plan, and each time she had found the work genuinely engaging in a way that reminded her who she was outside the last 2 years. She told him plainly, because she was a plain-speaking person, "My husband has been coming on weekends. He's working on the things that needed to be worked on." She looked at the creek. "I'm not. The situation is not simple. But I think it's time to go back and find out." Koren was quiet for a moment. He was not surprised. She had known he wouldn't be. "How do you feel about it?" he asked. "Scared," she said. "And also, I miss home. I miss my territory. I miss having my own space rather than someone else's guest room." She paused. "And I miss who we were before all of this. Or at least who I thought we were. I want to find out if that can be rebuilt." He nodded. "I think you should go," he said. She looked at him. "Koren, don't apologize," he said. "You have never offered me anything that required an apology. We are colleagues." And a brief pause, the kind that held more than it expressed. "Whatever else. But nothing that should keep you from going home." She looked at him. He was a good man. She had known that from the kitchen table and confirmed it over 6 weeks of creek work and the specific, easy friendship of 2 people who spoke the same professional language and had found, in that shared language, genuine liking. "The contamination remediation plan needs a 6-month follow-up," she said. "I know," he said. "I can come back for it," she said. "Professionally." The data will benefit from fresh eyes. I know, he said again. The slight smile. I'll look forward to it. She looked at the eastern ridge one more time. Then she drove back to Mortis to pack. She came home on a Saturday morning. Soren was there when she arrived. He had known she was coming. They had spoken on the phone with the careful, new quality of two people who were rebuilding the foundations of something and were treating every word with the respect that warranted. He was standing on the front step when her car turned into the drive. He did not rush her. He held the front door while she carried Ressa inside, and he took her bags without being asked, and he had. She noticed this immediately, the wolf's nose catching things the eyes didn't. He had cleaned the house. Not just tidied. Cleaned. The specific, thorough cleaning of a man who had decided that the place should be different, that she should walk into something that reflected the work he had been doing and not just the state she had left. She stood in the kitchen. Their kitchen. The table that held 400 evening meals. He stood in the doorway. "Welcome home," he said. Simply. Not with drama. With the specific, careful warmth of someone who knew those words were not automatic and was saying them meaning every one. She looked around the kitchen. She looked at him. "I'm going to need time," she said. "Not distance again. Time inside the same house, the same days. To see what this actually is." "I know," he said. "There are going to be moments where I don't fully trust it yet," she said. "I'm not going to pretend otherwise." "I know," he said again. "And if it starts going wrong again, I will tell you," he said. "I will tell you before I do anything other than tell you. I promise you that." She looked at him. She felt the bond in her chest. That pull, the one that had been pulling toward him through 6 weeks and 3 hours of distance, and every Saturday of watching him hold their daughter. It had never stopped. It had never been silent. "Okay," she said. That was all. Not a declaration. Not a forgiveness speech. Just okay. Which was where they were. Okay was enough to start. The rebuild was slow. Slow was correct. She had not gone back to perform a reconciliation. She had gone back to find out whether there was something worth finding. And the finding required time and the accumulation of evidence and the daily renewed question. Is this real today? Most days, the answer was yes. Some days it was complicated. Those were the days when she remembered the smell in the hallway, the lies said with green eyes, the voicemails that had started late and stopped when she stopped listening. The days when the distance from Thornmere to Mortis felt both very far and very small, depending on the quality of the morning. On those days, she did not perform wellness. She said, plainly, "Today is a hard day." And Soren, who was learning, genuinely learning, in the humbling, daily way of a man who had been shown himself clearly and was working to become something more honest, would say, "What do you need?" Not what should he do about it. Not defensiveness. Not justification. What did she need? That was new. That was the thing that had not existed before. She needed small things mostly. Sometimes she needed to take Ressa for a long walk in the forest alone. Sometimes she needed to sit in the kitchen and talk about the water assessment work she had started doing in Thornmere's own territory, because the work had always been the thing that made her most fully herself. Sometimes she needed him to hold Ressa so that she could sit in quiet for 20 minutes without anyone touching her. He gave her what she asked for. Not perfectly. Not without occasional moments where the old habits of deflection or distance showed at the edges. But consistently. Consistent was what she had asked for. The twist came 6 months after she returned home. Not a dramatic event. Not a confrontation. A phone call. From Celine. Deva took it in the kitchen. She almost didn't answer. The number unfamiliar, but the name she had been given by Soren when she asked, stored in her contacts on the reasoning that knowing was better than not knowing. She answered. Celine's voice was not what she had expected. Not cold. Not calculated. A real voice. A voice doing the thing that voices did when someone was about to say something they had been carrying for a long time. She said, "I owe you the truth about something." Deva went very still. She listened. What Celine told her was this. She had not come back to Thornmere by coincidence. She had come back deliberately, after months of hearing from mutual contacts that Soren's new mate bond was struggling. She had told herself it was because she loved him and had never stopped. She had told herself the bond was an interruption to something real, and that if she gave it time, it would run its course. She had told herself a great many things. "I came back to win him back," Celine said, plainly. "I want to be honest about that. I wasn't an innocent party in what happened. I knew he was mated and I came back anyway, and I pursued him and I am telling you this because you have a daughter and a marriage, and what I did was not," she stopped. "What I did was selfish. And it cost you 6 months. And I'm sorry." The kitchen was very quiet. Davis sat at the table. "Why are you telling me this now?" she said. "Because I left Thornmere 2 months ago," Celine said. "Because I've been looking at what I did, and a breath. Because I decided I wanted to be the kind of person who said the thing when the thing needed to be said." Another silence. "Did you love him?" Davis said. "Yes," Celine said. No hesitation. "Do you still?" A pause. "In the way you love something you've let go of." "Not in the way I did when I came back." Deva looked at the table. "Thank you," she said, "for calling." "I'm sorry it wasn't sooner," Celine said. They ended the call. Deva sat in the kitchen for a long time. Then she went to find Soren. He was in the back garden with Ressa, 7 months old now, sitting in the grass with the profound concentration of a baby discovering that grass was interesting, and Soren on his knees beside her, handing her things to investigate. She stood at the garden door and watched them. Her wolf was very quiet. Not the quiet of suppression, the quiet of something that had settled into a place it recognized. She stepped into the garden. Soren looked up. She sat in the grass next to him and next to Ressa, and she said, "Celine called." She watched his expression. Not guilt. He had already spent 6 months with the guilt, had worked through it in the ways that men work through guilt when they are actually doing the work. What she saw was something more complicated. The face of a man hearing an unexpected thing and trying to understand what it meant. She told him what Celine had said. He listened. When she finished, the garden was quiet except for Ressa making sounds at a beetle she had found. "She didn't have to do that," he said. "No," Davis said. "She didn't." A pause. "How do you feel?" he said. She thought about it. "Strangely calmer," she said. Like the last piece of something clarified. She looked at Ressa. She came back knowing what she was doing. That was a choice she made. And you made choices too. And I made mine. She paused. "And we're here." He looked at her. "We're here," he said. Something passed between them. Not a resolution, not the triumphant arrival of everything being fixed. Just a recognition of the actual ground they were standing on. Not the imagined ground, not the hoped-for ground. The real one, which was complicated and earned and more stable than the early version had been, precisely because it had been tested. She picked up the beetle Ressa was reaching for, examined it, and put it back in the grass safely. Ressa made a sound of outrage at the intervention. Soren laughed. It was, she thought, a good sound. Ressa Vale turned 1 in the autumn. She had her father's jaw and her mother's eyes and a wolf that was going to be something when it finally came, based on the way she watched the world, with an absolute, consuming attention that other adults found slightly unsettling and that Deva recognized as simply how her daughter looked at things. The birthday was not a large event. A small gathering. Morta came, Bress came, a handful of pack families with young children, the easy afternoon warmth of a community that had seen complicated things and had found its equilibrium. Corin Sech sent a gift. A small wooden toy shaped like a creek fish, hand-carved, with a note that said, "For the daughter of the best upstream analyst in the Western Territory." Dava showed it to Soren. He looked at it for a moment. "He's a good man," he said. She looked at her husband. "He is," she said. "No elaboration required." He nodded once. The nod of a man who understood the complete sentence. The Verek court published a territorial water study 6 months later that cited Dava's Thornmere freshwater assessment work as primary reference material for the Western region's contamination detection protocols. Her name was in the document 4 times. Soren found the document first. He brought it to the kitchen and set it in front of her at breakfast without saying a word. She read it. When she looked up, he was watching her with an expression she had not seen from him in a very long time. Pride. Not the pride of ownership or proximity. The real kind. The kind that was entirely for her. "For citations," he said. "It's standard for primary source material," she said. "Dava." "Fine," she said. "It's significant." "It's very significant," he said. She drank her coffee. "I've been thinking," she said, "about taking on a formal territory-wide assessment role. Not just Thornmere. A broader coverage. The contamination work Corin and I flagged suggests there may be similar undetected sources across 3 territories. That would require travel," he said. "Yes," she said. "Regularly," he said. "Yes," she said. He looked at her. "What do you need from me to make it work?" he said. "Not would it work. Not is that possible." What did she need? She looked at him. She remembered the kitchen table 2 years ago. The lying eyes. The smell she had not been designed to ignore. She remembered Morta's back porch. The long drives. The hard mornings. She remembered the garden, and the grass, and a beetle, and a man on his knees beside his daughter learning to be the person she needed. "Flexibility," she said. "Pack your own schedule around the travel weeks. Be home for Resso when I'm not." "Done," he said, without hesitation. She nodded. She picked up the territory study. She read her own name 4 times. She was, she thought, the same person she had always been. She had just had to walk away without a word to find out how much that person was worth. There is something about silence that the loudest people never understand. When Dava Vale drove north with her daughter and her packed bags and the quiet certainty of a woman who had measured something carefully and come to a conclusion, she did not make a speech. She did not issue an ultimatum. She did not demand anything in a voice raised to be heard. She walked away, without a word, and the silence, the absence, said everything a speech would have said and more. Because the thing about silence is that it cannot be argued with, cannot be managed, cannot be answered with the specific, practiced eloquence of a man who has learned to navigate confrontation. Silence just is, and a man left in silence has nothing to deflect against. He has only himself, and the empty crib, and the sound of a house from which the 2 most important things in it have departed without drama or accusation. That is a very specific kind of reckoning. It is the kind you cannot talk your way out of. Soren Vale had to meet it alone. And because he did, because he sat with it and looked at it and went through it rather than around it, he came out the other side as someone slightly different. Someone who understood, finally and fully, the difference between staying in a place and choosing to be there. Between existing in a life and living it deliberately. That understanding was not guaranteed. Not every person who is given silence uses it well. Some fill it with justification. Some use the absence to decide the problem was the person who left. Soren did neither. He did the harder thing. And the harder thing, slowly, made him worth coming back to. Not because the wrong thing was forgotten. Because the work was real. If this story found you tonight, If you know what it is to hold something together with both hands while the person who should be helping carry it is somewhere else, then this is for me to say and for you to hear. Walking away is not giving up. Sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. It is the act that says, I will not accept less than what I deserve. Not loudly, not with a speech, just by leaving and letting the absence do the telling. Sometimes the people we love need to sit in the quiet we leave behind before they understand what they had. Sometimes they don't. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, they do the work and come back different. Come back with the kind of certainty that can only be built from the inside. Dava Vale went north with her daughter. She did not wait to be chosen. She created the conditions under which a real choice was possible. And then she let the choice be made. That is not weakness. That is one of the bravest things a person can do. If this story left a mark on you, if it made you feel something real in the middle of your day or late into the night, please don't scroll past this. Subscribe to this channel right now. Not as a small thing, as the real thing it is. Because this channel makes stories for the people who have had to walk away from something they wanted to stay in. For the people who drove north at night with a baby in the back seat and told themselves it was going to be okay while not entirely believing it yet. For the people who have been the empty crib. For the people who did the work, alone, in the silence, and came back to someone they had to earn. This is for you. We make a new story every week on this channel. Stories about wolves and bonds and the brutally human experience of loving someone who has not yet learned how to love you back properly. Stories about the people who leave. Stories about the people who stay. Stories about what builds in the space between. Subscribe, like this video, turn on the bell, and drop in the comments right now, where in the world are you watching from? And then tell me the thing I really want to know. Have you ever walked away to make someone understand? Did they? I want to hear every word. Because your story matters. Every single one. The next story is coming. And it might be the one that finds you at exactly the right moment. Stay.